Hello and welcome back to Redirected. My name is Andrew East, and this is a show where we sit down with celebrities, athletes, entrepreneurs, really anybody who has experienced a pivot or change in life. At some point or another, we all go through them. So I wanted to sit down with people who have gone through these pivots well in hopes to hear some entertaining stories and also glean some wisdom. So my story is that I went from studying civil engineering to playing in the NFL to now creating digital content full time. There's been a lot of pivots. And I realized that so many people, really all of us, have really interesting career pivots. And so that's the inspiration for the show. And today we sit down with Brian Zitin, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Regora. Now, Brian tells us a story of how he created this company. It's really entertaining. But congratulations to Brian. At the time we recorded this, he had raised a good amount in capital, but they just announced that they raised $30 million in a Series B fundraising round. So congratulations to you, Brian. But Regora is a company that essentially helps take the headache out of residential property valuations and appraisals. And this is a continuation of our Forbes 30 Under 30 series, where we sit down with young, exceptional people who have a vision and ambition to change what our world looks like. He talks about how he came across this idea and how he kind of faked it till he made it. And I think he has some really good wisdom to share. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. And if you enjoy it, please give it a rating and subscribe to it on whatever platform you're listening to. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere where you can listen to audio. So we much appreciate that. And if you want to find out more about Brian and what he's up to, including all about his company, Regora, we will link that down below. But let's go ahead and roll into this one with Brian Zitin. Brian, thanks for joining today. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm excited.
Listen, so I was doing a little perusing, did some background checks on you, saw that you've bumped into Bo Burnham, saw that you met Khabib. Now you and I are here talking. I feel honored to be in the presence of a celeb like you right now. But are you a UFC guy?
I'm a huge UFC guy. I've been following it since I was like teenager. Been to a bunch of fights in Vegas. It's one thing that I follow super closely.
Wow, and is Khabib your guy?
I love Khabib. I don't know. I'm conflicted because McGregor was also like my hero. Like went to one of Conor's like fights before he really broke out and became the star that he was here in Boston, actually. But I don't know. I respect greatness. Khabib is certainly great. I don't think anyone can deny that.
So I don't know if the name Luke Sanders rings a bell, but he's a Nashville guy. Is in the UFC. I think the last fight he was in was maybe like a year ago, and we used to train at the same gym, and football workouts are mostly bench, squat, and like power clean. This guy would go in here and do like wall balls for like an hour straight, or he'd do like bear crawls for like 30 minutes. It's just a different mindset that you have to be to do fighting. Anyway, that was a digression. I'm curious, Brian. I love to start off the show by hearing about people's backgrounds, the foundation that has led them to where they are today. So give us kind of the potted version of what your parents were like and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I grew up actually right outside Philly. So I'm in Boston now, but I grew up right outside Philly there, what's called the Main Line, quote unquote. Went to like a regular public high school. I don't know how I got that name. I think it's from the train, like because it's just like part of that line.
I gotcha.
But yeah, just like classic kind of suburb sort of thing. Went to, like I said, public high school, and played sports. My parents were pretty normal. My dad is a doctor. My mom was a nurse before she had all the kids sort of thing. I have two older sisters as well. So nice. my dad's a doctor, so just kind of had pretty like normal, like regular childhood. I'd say played sports in high school, goofed off, and
Eagles fans over there or what?
Yeah, so yeah, we used to split season tickets with some people in our neighborhood, sort of thing. So I used to go down to the Eagles games a bunch growing up, the Donovan McNabb era and all that sort of stuff.
Sick.
Was yeah. So it was pretty. It was. I grew up in a cool Philly sports era, like Allen Iverson, McNabb, like that whole. I don't think they I mean, we were close a few times, but never actually sealed the deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so pretty normal upbringing, I'd say. My parents were definitely, I mean, anyone who grew up with me in high school would know. My parents are definitely, I would say, like quasi tiger parents sort of thing, in terms of, you know, always wanting more and better and that sort of thing. But that, you know, beyond that, pretty normal.
How'd you end up at BU, Boston?
My sister lived in Boston for a little bit. My dad was a doctor. I thought I was going to be a doctor for like the first, you know, 10, 15 years of my life sort of thing. So I went to BU. They had like just amazing hospitals here in Boston, like Mass General, and like their amazing research and all that. So I came because I was pre-med for the first like 2.5 years of college.
And what made you ultimately switch?
It was fun. I mean, I like that stuff. It's interesting. Really, one of my, and I give this guy a shout out all the time. One of my college roommates, he grew up, or he's from upstate New York. His family owns like this, you know, huge mobile home park business, in the real estate side of things. And his dad never went to college. I always thought it was like super interesting how these guys made this like multi-million-dollar business. Didn't, you know, like he just was a scrappy entrepreneur sort of thing. So started reading like, you know, real estate investment books, entrepreneurial books, that sort of thing. Kind of got into, you know, the idea was that I would do real estate investing and things like that in the future. And then slowly started learning about like money and time and all that sort of thing. And just didn't want to be in school till I was like 32, you know, in med school sort of thing. Yeah. And then, yeah, just switched to business right away.
So is that a different roommate than Will, who you ultimately co-founded Regora with?
That is a different roommate. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So Will, I had 2 or 3 roommates in college. One was, this real estate guy, and then the other was Will. And then I had 2 other dudes that I live with.
And at what point did you and Will decide you wanted to start a company?
Well, Will had been cooking up schemes from the start. So like I said, first 2 years or so of college, I was pre-med, but Will grew up in like middle of nowhere, Connecticut, and he's been coding since he was like 10 years old. So he's just one of those like scrappy street coder kids. And he was, you know, he had a bunch of different weird things that he tried to do in terms of like, you know, dorm room dining, like delivery service, or like he was drop shipping wallpaper at some point, like for like wallpaper, but it, like, you know, never worked out. He kind of had like he would be on a project for a month or 2 and then scrap it and go on to the next one sort of thing. And then, you know, by the time I switched to econ, I was like a junior. He was abroad in China, just studying abroad. And then when he came back, you know, which was, I think was like the beginning of summer going into senior year, we basically just decided like, we do not want to get jobs. So we got to figure out like whatever we can do in the next 8 months to like not have to go get a real job sort of thing. And then, you know, I ended up getting an internship at a big commercial real estate company, which kind of led into the whole Regora thing that we are now doing today.
Was the internship intentional, like learning grounds to build were the ideas already in progress for Regora, and so you were like, let me get some experience, or it was just coincidence?
No, not at all. Honestly, it just weirdly came together based off of my past internships. So the first internship that I had, I was like an intern at this private equity company there, where literally all they would it was a squad of interns, just like a room of unpaid young people, like a factory line sort of thing, where we would just find contact information of like people who own local companies and hit them up and be like, hey, do you want to sell your business to, you know, and then we would hand it off to the guys if they said yes, and it became this whole sales funnel sort of thing. So my first internship got like some exposure into just like private equity stuff in terms of prospecting for companies, that whole thing. And then, you know, wanted to do real estate because, like I said, I was interested in real estate investing and whatnot. Like if you Google my name, like really long, where it really got started was posting on like real estate forums and stuff. Like, hey, how do I get experience in real estate? All of that. People recommended that I go get an internship at like a big brokerage because you see a lot of the business. So I got an internship at this company called JLL. And then we saw that brokers were, you know, JLL is like the number 2 company in the world for commercial real estate brokerage. And the brokers were still kind of knocking on doors and cold calling. So the gist of what we first got started with was not Regora, which is like appraisal tech, which, you know, I'm sure we'll get into. But we started our own real estate brokerage. So beginning of senior year, we basically combined my skill set with Will's, which was, let's figure out a way to programmatically reach out to thousands of property owners, just like I did at my first internship with company people, and then, you know, try to broker investment deals sort of thing. So we started up this company. It was called Sonder Partners. It was like just really regal. Like we were just trying to be not 22-year-olds who like, you know, didn't know what we were doing sort of thing. Just pretend that we were some like wealthy royal family. So Sonder Partners was born, and we could basically, he made this algorithm that could programmatically hit up thousands of people throughout Massachusetts. So we would just basically spam out emails being like, hey, you want to sell your property? Hey, you want to sell your property? And, you know, we work with very sophisticated investors in your area, like pretending that we were way bigger than we were sort of thing. I would skip class and then go like show these buildings to investors. And we sold like $5 million worth of real estate doing that throughout my senior year. So it was kind of ridiculous.
And so I understand Regora was born literally just from talking to people. Can you explain more about how that kind of garnered momentum for the concept?
Yeah, well, we didn't know anything, right? Even when we were brokering these buildings, like we still didn't know much about the process at all. And so we were just kind of winging it. And, you know, we had some success, right? But eventually you run out of people to just programmatically email. So we were looking for like the next idea to kind of go do. And as we were brokering these buildings, as part of like the financing process, you know, the buyer has to get the building appraised. So an appraiser walks in who, you know, the average appraiser is like 65-year-old with a clipboard sort of thing. Really low tech, really manual process. We were like, oh, that seems like it could use some revamping with some technology sort of thing. So then, you know, I just started cold emailing a bunch of appraisers, calling them, being, hey, can I just learn about your business, hear any problems that you have, any of that sort of thing. And so would then just kind of drive out to like these appraisers' homes, watch them do their work, and yeah, just learn the business by just like literally shadowing people like that.
So I'm curious, it sounds like you're a little bit like Will, your co-founder, in the sense that you're always in this process of looking for something that would kind of stick. You know, he threw out and scrapped multiple concepts beforehand. What was the difference with those concepts that got trashed and Regora? Like, at what point were you like, oh my gosh, this actually has hope?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I feel like for him, a little bit of it was just boredom. Like he probably could have powered through like with some of that stuff and seen the light at the end of the tunnel. I think for us, you know, first of all, it got like pretty real because we had graduated and it's like, all right, well, if this doesn't work out, then we have to go, you know, apply for jobs and all that sort of stuff. Right. So we kind of had to make it work, but also there was just kind of real demonstrable traction in the market. Like we got good feedback from the actual users. Like, yeah, no, this is great. Like we'd use it. So I think, you know, I always joke because a bunch of, you know, everyone's had that friend or someone that's like, yo, I got this idea for an app. It's going to crush it. You know, we're going to be this next big thing. And then, but they don't actually like ever go talk to people about like whether they would actually be good or not. They just like think that that the idea is good because they came up with it. It was kind of the opposite. We had so many people telling us that this problem existed that, you know, we kind of, you know, had just direct proof that it was going to work.
How did you attract your first couple of users? Like that, I feel like that's a big issue that a lot of people have too is, hey, you know, you've been doing a 65-year-old with a clipboard. You've been doing this way for 40 years. Let me just switch things up for you. That's tough, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, it is, especially because like, just that kind of inertia to change in terms of like adopting new technology, adopting new anything, right? I think that there's like this like curve, right, of like people who are early adopters of technology and processes versus like people that aren't, like the stodgy ones over here. I think we just talked to enough people, enough appraisers and enough like lenders that we stumbled our way into finding those early adopters who were willing to like take the bet and that sort of thing. So I think people probably end up getting discouraged because they're talking to the right types of people, but not on that spectrum, not the right ones. So I think we just got lucky and talked to enough people in that regard.
All right. One more question on this note. You mentioned with Sonder Partners, there's kind of this, in order to gain traction, you needed to act like you already had previous successes. You've been to Vegas multiple times, it sounds like. I'm sure you've seen plenty of people out there who put on like a front that's pretty hollow when you dig into it. What's the balance? Because I do think it's super important to have the confidence and I guess scrappiness to like have enough confidence in yourself to be like, we can do this. You just have to give us a try. And in order to do that, we're going to, kind of conflate some things over here. What is the line in your eyes between, absolutely faking it and just getting yourself an opportunity to get in the door?
That's a good question. Probably a very fine line, right? Because like, I am a fan of fake it till you make it to some degree because, now, right, we work with like dozens and dozens of financial institutions throughout the country disrupting appraisal. In the beginning, though, we were like a couple 22-year-old knuckleheads that had to like convince people to give us that chance. And if, people thought that they were like the first ones doing it, they may not have been willing. I think like the difference is like, can you actually deliver what you're going to say? Like if you're just completely fraudulent, like, that's one thing. If you're going to actually truly believe that you're going to end up providing value, then like, I don't know, maybe the ends maybe the means justify the ends a little bit in that regard. So I guess you got to have like a tight moral compass in that regard.
Because I'm a big fan of fake it till you make it too. But on the other hand, you see people who do it poorly and it like, I just detest some aspect of it. If I guess you're probably right in the deliverability factor. But anyway, transitioning back to Regora, I would love to hear about what you guys do. Fill us in.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically, the goal of Regora long term is to kind of do what like Kelley Blue Book did for cars. So in that like completely commoditize, residential real estate valuation and kind of make it more digestible versus what it is today. So like today, things like the Zillow's estimate exist if you're familiar with like the whole Zillow's estimate. But like automated valuation models like that in professional real estate, no one really takes them seriously. So if you're like the mortgage lender or the home insurance company or like Goldman Sachs buying mortgage-backed securities, like have you ever seen The Big Short or something like that? Like no one takes the Zillow's estimate seriously just because it's not very accurate in terms of kind of at scale. Like the margin of error on it isn't to the degree that people are comfortable with it in terms of like lending big sums of money and whatnot oftentimes. So today we have this appraiser who's this like human who goes out to the property and physically verifies kind of the information about the building, right? So they kicking the tires around, they're doing an inspection, they're writing things down on the clipboard, physically looking at it, verifying, and then kind of delivering a value. And it's super slow. Like right now, especially with kind of how crazy the market is right now, you can imagine like global pandemic and, super low interest rates. Like if someone's trying to get a mortgage or something, it takes weeks to get an appraisal done. So there's this big problem in terms of like, how do you make, and similarly, like most consumers, when they're like buying a property for the first time or putting their house for sale, they have no idea what the property is truly worth, like definitively. They got to rely on a broker, pay them 5%, all this stuff. So the long-term goal is to like empower residential real estate valuation as much as possible for everyone involved and kind of make it more digestible and easy to do and all that sort of stuff. Today, what we're doing to kind of get to that future place is kind of like an Uber style platform between banks and appraisers. So if a bank is trying to order an appraisal, we have like this two-sided platform that links them directly to the right appraiser and kind of facilitates that whole thing A to Z with like, the Domino's pizza tracker of the status of the appraisal through all that. So we basically today make the appraisal better, faster, cheaper. And in the future want to make valuation like, as easy as possible. So that let's say that you're going to, renovate your home in Nashville. You want to switch out the bathroom tile with something new. You would know maybe what that's going to contribute to the ultimate value of your home sort of thing. And, even that kind of level of granularity.
There's a lot of stuff to unpack there. I would love to hear you touch on the concept of market preparedness. So in some ways it's too big of a leap to roll out that end goal product that you have in mind, right? So how strategic was it to take that first step before you get to the end goal?
No, yeah, you are exactly correct. Like, it's really hard, especially when you're in like a really, like the financial services, financial technology industry. There's tons of regulations. There's, a lot of inertia in terms of just people have been doing the same thing forever. So to go from like 0 to 1 is really difficult. You kind of need to drag people to the future a little bit. And so, working with industry stakeholders to kind of get there is what you got to do. And so kind of delivering the first version of the system gets our foot in the door with these folks, gets us into the market, starts building up this network where we can slowly start working with the relevant people to kind of transition to that future. If you go like too far ahead, you can almost miss the boat. So like, I don't know if you follow like blockchain or any of the like, that sort of new tech, like it's almost like too ahead of the curve for commercialization in a lot of industries sort of thing. So you kind of got to incentivize the existing stakeholders first and then kind of bring them there versus like just jump right there. So it kind of depends on the industry, but that's at least how it is for us in financial services. Yeah,
that's a good point. Also talk about Will is a technical founder. How important was that as you sought fundraising?
It was super important. I mean, because especially with like people with no track record at all, right? We had to demonstrate that we had some ability to actually deliver on what we said we were going to do. And so being able to like build a product and not have to spend a bunch of money to go hire people and then kind of get initial user feedback and all that sort of stuff is absolutely crucial. So if we didn't have him, then it wouldn't have worked at all, because I can't code. So we wouldn't have been able to like produce the initial traction, wouldn't have been able to go raise the money and kind of all that stuff. So I always try to recommend people to team up with someone like that.
Yeah. And then last thing is, what was the strategy for rollout once you had a product that was ready for use? People talk about Facebook just starting at Harvard and then rolling out to college campuses and then expand from there. Was there a slow and steady release like that, or was it splatter the map?
No, it was definitely slow and steady, because similarly, like, we just rolled out a product, young team, not a lot of people. We're not going to go sign Bank of America like the next day. You know what I mean? First of all, we probably wouldn't be able to handle that and at the time. And then second, like, would Bank of America have been willing to take a bet on like a 4-person company sort of thing? Probably not, right? So we started off local here in New England, worked with like small local banks first, kind of built up logos and reputation and worked out any kinks, then moved on to the next biggest lenders and then kind of spread it from there. So you definitely got to kind of build up that initial, at least for enterprise software, you kind of got to build up that initial credibility and then kind of go from there. And it was mostly just me doing all the selling in the beginning. Now we have like a sales team and a chief revenue officer and all of that, but you got to be just like as scrappy as possible to try to get in front of those kind of early customers.
Yeah. So the traction has been real. I believe you have over $15 million in funding. How fun has it been to see the concept from birth all the way to now, where you have a team to manage and these big stakeholders to get involved?
I don't know if fun's the right word, but it's definitely a roller coaster. It's definitely stressful. I'd say it's fulfilling, right? Like, it's definitely like cool to see when you work on something for like nonstop for years straight, to see kind of that materialize in the real world. We try to celebrate our wins, when they come, but it's also at the same time, and maybe this is probably similar, right? For someone like yourself who's like, very successful, ultra competitive, it's also like always a little bit of like, all right, what's next? So like, all right, how do we get this even better, and how do we keep going? So I think me and my co-founder always joke about it. I think this is the right term, but something called like the hedonic treadmill, where it's like back in the day when we first got started, raising $500,000 was like insane and amazing and like ridiculous. Now if I get investors like, can I toss in a little bit of money? It's like not a big deal at all, sort of thing. Yeah. So I think some of that loses, momentum over time, sort of thing. But it's always good to kind of, I think the next level of the journey is kind of always the thing driving you there.
Yeah. I experienced that in my athletic career where it's like coming out of high school, I was not recruited by any big colleges, right? Then Vanderbilt gives me a scholarship because of wild circumstances. So I go play in the SEC, which without a doubt is the best football conference. I don't really know how you feel about that coming from Philly, maybe a Penn State fan. But then it's like now I'm at the SEC, like playing in the SEC. Then it's like, well, maybe let me see if I can go pro. So then I signed my first contract, and it's like, well, let me see if I can play 5 years in the NFL and get tenure and all this stuff. And it's like, oh, what about – and it just never ends. At some point, like I think it's a fine line of the appreciation for how far you've come, and then also like realizing that maybe your potential is more, so continuing to be ambitious, but not getting so caught up in always trying to pursue the next thing. But I'm curious, what are your goals now? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask before, do you think that that's real? Like, you always hear that like thing of like, oh, you got to appreciate it while you're doing it. But it's always from the people who are like way further ahead. You know what I mean? Like when you were going through that, like, high school to college, like, were you like, wow, like I'm appreciative, or were you like, oh, I got to get to the next phase that like, or now looking back, you kind of feel that?
So that's interesting. I think once the treadmill stopped, that's when I really embraced that philosophy where like I got cut from the Chiefs, which was my first team in the NFL, and like up to that point it was just momentum was building and all of these dreams that I never even had before were happening, and then I got cut, and then I wanted that dream of playing in a game so much more badly, right? And it took me 5 years to get there. So at some point, probably like 2 or 3 years in, I was like wait, you know what? I've accomplished like a lot, but it was when the treadmill had to stop first. Does that make sense?
All right. Well, then I think I'm still a long ways away from having the appreciation.
I hope the treadmill doesn't stop for you because you guys are on a roll right now. But what are your goals?
Like personally, or you mean with like the company specifically?
Let's talk about Regora first, and then your personal.
Regora, the goal is to, like I said, just completely transform valuation and really just take over. Like we're in kind of one of those businesses where you can actually kind of build like a big moat, like monopoly type of thing. Like it'd be super hard to start an Uber today, right? And we're trying to build out like a similar type of moat in that thing. So we think we can take over like the whole industry, and like we're young guys, like families to take care of, sort of thing. So we got a lot of runway in terms of taking that home run swing. Personally, I have no idea what comes after that. Like I always go back and forth. It's like, do you go do the like, post up on a beach for 5 years or whatever and just like do whatever, or do you like go do some altruism and like give back? Like I think I probably won't know until I get there. But what I realized back when we started was like, in order to even have those kind of considerations, you kind of need to be able to have financial freedom. So that's kind of step one, and then figure it out from there, at least personally.
Yeah. How many hours a day would you say you work right now, Brian?
From dusk till dawn. I mean, like it doesn't stop. I had a phone call like 10 p.m. last night with an investor, sort of thing. It depends on the day. I would say pretty much every day except Sunday, at least, 7 to 5 or 6, and then probably like intermittent stuff at nighttime, sort of thing. It's definitely a lot for sure. It never turns off.
Yeah, it's fun in the sense of like that you're gonna look back and really appreciate this time of like grinding it out. Like when you look back on your sports career. And like for football, we had 4 a.m. workouts, and you hated it while you were doing it. But then you look back, you're like, wow, you know what? That was worthwhile for me to do. I don't know if I'd want to go back, but it was good.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think anyone ever is like, yeah, I'll go back. Or like, similar thing for. It's funny. People are, always like, oh, like trust me, money's not the answer or whatever. But I don't think anyone's ever given the money back, you know? So I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's so funny and true. I'm curious, Brian. So, as young as you may be, you've accomplished a lot. You've experienced a lot, successes and failures. What are 3 things that you've learned, or maybe someone has told you that you could share with us today?
I think the first is that I think that a lot of limitations that people think that they have are really kind of self-imposed. Like I think that once you kind of get out there and try to do things, you learn that you can like accomplish way more than what you may have originally thought. So I think, you know, not establishing self-limitations and really kind of dreaming big is the number one thing. Number 2, and this is a little bit back to like the whole fake it till you make it. I mean, you definitely got to dream big, but also you got to surround yourself with people who have been there, done that before, like mentors sort of thing. So I've learned, you know, significantly to lean on people who like are better than me or more knowledgeable than me in their respective domains. So definitely like super important to kind of reach out. And then number 3, and maybe this isn't true because like you have people like Elon Musk who are like apparently sleeping in the factories and stuff like that. But I also think kind of having some balance in terms of like taking care of yourself, regardless of what you're doing, is important to kind of, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so I think, you know, I've gotten better at that over time, but definitely kind of learned it the hard way that you do need to kind of get some R&R and all of that throughout the process.
Have you ever run a marathon, Brian?
No, I don't ever plan to. I can, the people that do that are crazy to me. I'm a terrible runner.
Yeah, no, me too. That was the last time I was in Boston though, was to run the Boston Marathon, and it destroyed me, bro. That was, speaking of the hedonic treadmill, that was the one time where I was like, nah, I went off this thing. Like I don't want to do that. I don't want to do the next mile. But anyway, that's
did you just do that like randomly?
So we did it because my wife kind of coerced me into it, and then she ended up getting pregnant, so she didn't even freaking do it, but I was already too deep into training to give it up. So I did the Boston Marathon, and then the next day I had to show up to my first day of off season with the Redskins. So I got dude, I was so destroyed. Anyway, it's a story for another time. But the R&R thing is so important, and for whatever reason, I feel like recently I'm a big book guy, not necessarily novels, although I'm up for those sometimes, but like I've randomly read a couple books that are all along that same philosophy of like, hey, there's more. Work is super fulfilling in your life, and you should have purposeful work, but also there's other good things in life too. A couple of them are like the ruthless elimination of hurry was one book. Margin is a good one. Essentialism, that's a pretty popular one within the entrepreneur space. Anyway, so I appreciate that perspective, but I also appreciate you joining us today. It was an honor to meet you, man. I'm excited for what you're building and for what's next. We're going to be following you over here, and let us know if there's anything we could do to help.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. It's great to connect, and look forward to catching up again sometime soon.
Cool, Brian. Thanks.